Donald Trump has never cared about real results or genuine leadership. Now his obsession is political theatre, cheap stunts meant to fool his supporters into thinking he's actually doing something. Now that's exactly why his inner circle has been packed with talking heads straight out of Fox News rather than serious, qualified leaders. Now what happens when you build a government out of cable news personalities? You're going to get cable news outcomes. Empty, shallow and embarrassing. Today we're going to dig into everything they're trying to hide, guys. But before we do, please do drop a like and subscribe if you're part of the growing wave that refuses to stay silent. Every click helps that this truth reach the people who really need to hear it. Now, that's precisely why Trump had to suddenly scrap his entire schedule, all to cater to some reckless idea cooked up by Pete Hegseth. Now, it's an idea so absurd that military leaders across the country are openly mocking him and Hegseth. Once again, we're watching another dangerous performance, an act of political showboating that puts the spotlight on Trump's ego instead of America's interests. Now, it needs to be called out for exactly what it is, guys. It's reckless and harmful political theatre. Now, before we talk about what Trump and Hegseth are up to in Chicago, I want you to take a look at what Jessica called out right here.
Well, there's a difference between D.C. and these other places because Donald Trump is actually in charge of D.C. The other states elect their own governments, and they are the ones who are responsible for the health and safety of their citizenry and have a right to push back against a president that has not been invited to send his troops. And he's already been overruled by a court for what he did in Los Angeles, where they said you can send them, but they can only guard that building. So we're going to have a couple hundred National Guard members standing around one building. And that's what it's going to end up being. Or you'll have scenes like we had from Chicago. I'm sure you guys saw a delivery guy went by ICE officers that were standing there wearing masks just in the middle of the day, a nice kind of, fall day in Chicago, and I think he yelled F Trump at them, and then you see them chasing him down the street and he gets away. And that's what a lot of people think is going on here, that it is unnecessary. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a way to work together maybe on the south side of Chicago, but in Oregon, I trust the AG there who says we have enough people to deal with this, and they have been dealing with it for several months. President Trump and the administration want to normalize militarized cities. They've talked about it. It doesn't bother them. It doesn't bother Jesse. He would, if we walked outside there, he wouldn't be upset if he saw a militarized New York City.
Kathy Hochul put the guard in the subway, and you didn't have a problem with that,
did you? Kathy Hochul is in charge of New York State. Donald Trump is not in charge of Oregon or in charge of Illinois, but he doesn't seem to understand that.
Donald Trump is trying to turn American cities into his own personal stage for militarization. Now he's using fear and force as a pretext to tighten his grip before the 26 midterms. And his cronies know exactly how unpopular they are, so instead of actually earning support, Trump resorts to the same tired playbook, posing like someone wannabe strongman while he's sending troops into predominantly blue cities. Let's be clear, guys, this isn't about safety, it's not about law and order. It's about setting the stage for him to scream fraud in 2026. Now he'll claim ballot boxes are dangerous, he'll rant about so-called illegals voting everywhere. A lie he's actually been peddling for years, and then he tried to use the military intimidation to suppress the vote. That's his strategy. It's not winning hearts and minds, but it's scaring people out of democracy. Now, Pete Hegseth, he's playing his part obviously in this circus, parading around with some overblown speech about dragging generals across the country and even the world at his little show. And guess what? They're laughing at him. They're actually mocking him because the whole thing is just as ridiculous and dangerous. Trump's connection to this stunt, what is it? It's not just pathetic, it's a threat to the very foundation of the elections. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has summoned the US military's most senior leadership from their posts all around the globe to an all-hands meeting Tuesday in Virginia, and a retired general said the Pentagon's chief stated reasons were insulting and condescending. Mark Hertling, a retired US Army Lieutenant General, said those officers and senior enlisted personnel were already deeply familiar with the topic of Hegseth's lecture, which Scarborough referred to as a rah-rah speech because it's one of the 4 elements on which military culture is based. The warrior ethos is just one part of the professional triad that the military has, Hertling said. You have the oath to a constitution, the service's values. I can still name the Army's values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, integrity, honour and personal courage. All services have that, and then the warrior ethos is just a preformative method of actualizing that. Well, it started out that way, and then it became, well, no. There was an announcement that someone in the Pentagon said this was all about getting the horses into the stable and whipping them into shape. That's insulting and condescending. Hertling believes the president got involved after his defense secretary faced immediate blowback for calling out the highly unusual meeting. Pete Hegseth decided to throw himself a little ego-driven rally. Basically, it's a vanity parade where the focus wasn't on anything meaningful but on flexing his muscles, waving flags and shirts, pants, belts, just turning patriotism into some kind of cheap costume. None of it actually matters, guys. None of it makes the country safer, and in fact it puts the country at greater risk. Why? Because Hegseth is literally pulling generals away from their real duties just to feed his own publicity stunt. And of course, Donald Trump couldn't, resist tagging along. He never passes up an opportunity to attach himself to an event that's all flash and no substance. Now, even when it makes the country less secure. So what did he do? He just scrapped his entire schedule, cancelled everything without thought, and just rushed over, and thought, let's be part of another useless spectacle. It's reckless. It's just self-serving and exactly what we've come to expect from Donald Trump. President Donald Trump has decided he's going to the last-minute global gathering of nations' top generals that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered last week, he said on Sunday, setting the stage for a highly unusual meeting between the Commander-in-Chief and the US military leaders. Trump's appearance at Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia not only overshadows Hegseth's planned address, but adds new security concerns to the massive and nearly unprecedented military event, which has required some generals and admirals to travel thousands of miles. Trump cast the discussion largely as pep talk. It's really just a very nice meeting talking about how well we're doing militarily, talking about being in great shape, talking about a lot of good positive things. It's just a good message. Trump said in an interview with NBC News, we have got some great people coming in and it's just an esprit de corps. You know the expression esprit de corps? That's all it's about. We're talking about what we're doing, what they're doing and how we're doing. The comments came after the Washington Post reported earlier in the day that Trump was joining the event, whose creation caught senior military leaders by surprise last week. We have confirmation from the White House that POTUS is now attending the speech on Tuesday, states a planning document sent Saturday that was viewed by the Post. Notice went out to officers around the Pentagon that this decision will significantly change the security posture of the speech set for Tuesday morning at Marine Corps University. The addition of the president at Quantico will now put the Secret Service in charge of securing the event. Hundreds of military's top commanding generals and admirals ranked 1-star and above, along with their senior enlisted leaders, were ordered to attend by Hegseth last week. The orders provided no reason for the event and initially raised concern among attendees and military officials that Hegseth was gathering the group to inform them of mass firings or demotions. So what's the real point of all this, guys? Why is the meeting even happening? Let's be honest, it's nothing but theatre. Donald Trump is staging yet another performance, desperate to turn everything into a show about himself. The expectation is obvious. He'll just get up there and give a speech where he demands applause from top military officials while he launches into cheap attacks on blue states, Democratic governors, Democratic mayors, and basically anyone who doesn't bow down to him. See, he's likely to brag about the illegal actions against American cities, pat himself on the back for attempted invasions like Chicago, and fame military intimidation as some kind of victory. Guys, this isn't leadership, it's a con. Now, Trump saw Hegseth's military leaders. He brought them into this circus and thought, how can I hijack this for my own agenda? How can I just twist it around into, some excuse to push a more militarized assault on American soil? Now, that's exactly what's happening here. It's nothing new. Remember Fort Bragg? It was a couple of months ago. Trump handpicked soldiers to literally stand behind him as props, clapping on cue while he hurled insults at Governor and smeared Mayor Bass, I believe it was. It was disgraceful then, and he's trying to recreate it now. What he wants is the image of generals applauding him, probably against their own will, while he rants about political enemies. But here's the thing, guys. The military is not supposed to be, to be staged for applause. There's supposed to be strict line between politics and defense, between protecting the nation and propping up one man's fragile ego. Trump is erasing that line entirely. He doesn't care about safety. He doesn't care about democracy. He only cares about feeding his obsession with praise and manufacturing permission to keep escalating his reckless, dangerous attacks. Take a look at what, JB had to say on this.
60% of the individuals that ICE has taken in Illinois this year have no criminal convictions of any kind. ICE is running around the loop harassing people for not being white. Just a year ago, that was illegal in the United States. Now, ICE is making it commonplace. That's not making America great. In any other country, if federal agents fired upon journalists and protesters when unprovoked, what would we call it? If federal agents marched down busy streets, harassing civilians and demanding their papers, what would we say? I don't think we'd have any trouble calling it what it is: authoritarianism. So let's not pretend it's something else when it happens in our American cities. The MAGA Republican-supported invasion of Portland and Chicago and LA and Washington, D.C. is not making us any safer. Instead, it is putting our people in danger. This is an attack on neighborhoods, on lawful residents, on U.S. citizens. That's not preventing crime, as Donald Trump claims. That's threatening public safety.
We all know what Trump is after here, guys. It's the same thing he always craves: a photo op, another hollow performance to feed his obsession with political theatre. He doesn't care about policy. He doesn't care about governance. He just wants the spotlight. And what's truly disturbing is, how he's misusing the military, not just in recent weeks or months, but throughout his entire presidency. This is the same man who once floated the idea of shooting protesters in the legs, as if state violence was just another cheap stunt to boost image. Thankfully, his defense secretary at the time, Mark Esper, shut it down. But let's be honest, no's not a word Trump ever accepts. And it certainly isn't in Pete Hegseth's vocabulary either. Hegseth, like the rest of Trump's enablers, won't ever stand up to him. He's not going to push back. He's not going to show independence. He's simply fall in line. Now, because just like every other cabinet official under Trump, he serves one audience and one audience only, and that's Donald Trump himself. Every decision, every move, every stunt revolves around keeping Trump happy and keeping his ego inflated. And let's not kid ourselves here. It's all political, obviously. It's a setup for 2026, a cynical ploy to lay the groundwork for more chaos around the midterms. Now, the Governor, J.B. Pritzker, called it out perfectly. This isn't leadership, it's propaganda, and it's as dangerous as it is pathetic.
But as I've said many times, for Donald Trump and the MAGAs in Congress, this is not about fighting crime or about public safety. This is about sowing fear and intimidation and division among Americans. It was about creating a pretext to send armed military troops into our communities. This is about consolidating power in Donald Trump's hands. What he plans to do with that power, now or during the 2026 elections, should worry all of us. When you add to that the Trump administration's effort to label as dangerous free speech critical of him, White House senior staff calling the Democratic Party fascist, the Trump-appointed FCC chair threatening to revoke broadcast licenses and the approval of a merger in order to silence late-night comedians, Trump's threats to jail political opponents, you cannot call this anything except an attack on the Constitution of the United States.
If you think for a second that this isn't a political stunt by Donald Trump, then you clearly haven't been paying attention to who this man is. Of course it's political. Everything is, he does about consolidating power and feeding his fragile ego. The whole event is nothing more than Trump trying to create a permission slip for himself, a practice run for the kind of intimidation he thrives on. He doesn't care about strategy. He doesn't care about he only cares about optics. He wants the military leader standing behind him, clapping on cue, smiling in a forced approval. So, he can dress up as some tough guy, strong man. That's all this is about, manufactured applause and fake strength. And the fact that this whole thing came together so hastily makes it even more alarming. It absolutely reeks of, Pete Hegseth's last-minute publicity stunts, cooked up to flatter Trump and give him the illusion of legitimacy. After the embarrassing flop of their so-called invasion of Chicago, Trump and his allies are clearly deciding that this was their chance to rebrand failure success. Now, what's the logic, you may ask? You get a bunch of top brass in the room, make them clap, sell the image of unity, power, then pretend that gives them a green light to keep escalating. The truth is the opposite. This isn't unity, it's manipulation, it's propaganda. It's meant to deceive the public into believing Trump's chaos has anything to do with, anything realistic. It's just all smoke and mirrors. And that's why it has to be called that every single time. And as always, guys, please make sure to smash that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. If you made it all the way to the end, please leave a blue heart in the comments to show that you're standing strong and refusing to be silenced. Keep fighting, keep questioning, and I'll see you on the next one.